All right, so let's chat about sessions. We're going to be using a library, this library right here, the Express dash session library. This is the thin layer of abstraction that handles sessions. Okay, in Node.js, it uses a cookie as its lower, it's a raw layer that talks to the headers, right? That extracts the cookies, parses these cookies from the HTTP headers. So to work on this, you'll need to install a couple of libraries. Let's see, where is it? We'll need to install these two libraries, the cookie parser and the express session library, right? The cookie parser, like the body parser that we looked at a couple weeks ago, right? Knows how to parse cookies from the headers. Right? Out of the box, Node.js doesn't know how to parse cookies from the headers, right? So we need to require that library. And then on top of that, we have the express session library that is built on top of the cookie handling, right? And which gives us this thin this layer of abstraction on top of the cookie, right? So let's do that. Let's see. I believe I've already installed it. I've already ran npm install cookie parser -- save. Don't forget to -- save for both cookie parser and express session. And let's just verify that. If you've installed it, make sure that they are in your package JSON. And indeed, I have that right here. So express session and cookie parser. Right. So I've installed that already. Then from your server.js, make sure to load them. And I have done that already. Cookie parser. I loaded the cookie parser library, and I loaded the express session library. All right, everybody okay? The next thing is we need to configure them. To configure them, first you need to instantiate the cookie parser, right? Call the function, right? And then in that order, after instantiating the cookie parser, you're going to instantiate the session. Right? Now the session takes at least one argument, one configuration object, right? Here you can pass all sorts of configuration parameters. The only one that is required is the secret parameter. Okay, the secret parameter is a string that the session library uses to sign the cookie. Right? To make sure that the cookie is encrypted, right? That it's illegible for anyone on the client side, because the cookie might have some some compromising information, right? User IDs might be in there. Certainly we're going to be using it to store some information that we can then use to uniquely identify the user, right? And we don't want that to be publicly available. Up to this point, we have been exposing the user ID, haven't we? Right? And that's too much. That's exposing way too much. The user identifying a user that we can identify the user by that user ID. Now the secret needs to be a string. It can be any string, right? As long as you agree and always use that one string, whatever you choose. Typically, you would not expose it like this in clear text in source code. Instead, typically you would use process.env, something like session secret, right? So you have it stored as an environment variable in your server in a safe place. Nobody, only system admins perhaps can take a look at that, access to that machine, right? But it should not be in the source code. So I don't want to see it in your source code, in your GitHub, right? So it should be an environment variable, okay? I'm lazy, so I'm just putting it here. Actually, I might have it already, but anyway. So there it is. So we have the cookie parser, and we have the session, right? So let's play around with the session. What it does is that it instantiates a session object. It's basically a hash table. That's all it is, right? Now depending on the user who invokes this, you get a different hash table. User 1 will get one hash table. User 2 will have another hash table. In that hash table, you can put whatever you want in it, right? You can put any JSON object that you want inside of it. Let's play around with that. Okay, let's create here a little app. Maybe we'll do a require, and we'll go into maybe where do we have it here? We'll go into maybe lectures. Let's go under graduate, and here we'll say create a session, and let's create a little app.js in there. So app.js, right? And just to make sure that we are in there, let's just say hello here, console log session lecture. Okay, and here we're going to require. Let's see, we're going to go into lectures or require. Let's see, we are in lectures. We'll go under graduate. We'll go under session, and we'll go under app.js. Okay, right. So if we run that, let's verify that we are hitting that. There we go, session lecture. So we're in that directory, in that file. Okay. So let's close that, and let's go into session app.js. So what we're going to do here, let's grab an instance of Express, right, so we can receive some queries from the client. What we'd like to be able to do is hit the same URL with 2 clients, see if we get something different. Okay, each one should have its own piece of data, right, its own session. So let's require it. Require. Maybe go up one, go up another one, up one, another one. There we go. And so let's listen for an incoming get, and we'll call this. It'll be API, maybe lectures, graduate, and graduate session. We'll call it. Okay. And this one, we'll do something like function request response. Okay, and we'll go do console log request. Now notice that there's a brand new excuse me. Excuse me. Notice that there's a new object in here, right? The session object that wasn't there before. Okay, the session library that we just created, that we just required, adds this session object to the request, right? Which gives us access to our session, right? For individual users, right? Each user will have its own session. Okay, so one of the things we might want to do here, let's bring that over. We're going to respond and just send back, just send the session back. Send the request session. Let's just send it back. We'll echo it. Make sense? Everybody good? All right. So let's restart the server. So if I access it from one user, we say localhost 3000 API. What was it? Lectures? I forget. Lectures graduate session. Okay. Notice that it comes back with this object. Okay. This object, so this object will be different depending on who the user that hits it. So for instance, if I hit it with some others from some other client, notice that I started an incognito. Right. Notice that for now they look similar. Well, they look exactly the same, right? But they are actually different instances. Right. Each one has its own instance because each one has different cookies. Right. Notice that I access using incognito so that the server can't tell that it's actually the same vendor, right? The same browser. It's two different instances of browsers, each one with its own set of cookies. Okay, but if I let's add to this. Let's add to this. Let's make so that I can pass maybe some value here, some name and some value. Okay, and then I can store things in the session. I can say store in the session. It's a remember this is a hash table. I can index it maybe using the name. So let's retrieve that var name equal request dot params dot name. Right, and let's retrieve the value. And then we can put in the name, we can store the value. Okay, so I just put in a hash table, right, using the name as a key and the value as the value of whatever I want to store. This is arbitrary. I can store whatever I want, right? I'm creating a very silly example, right, where the client is giving me the key and it's giving me a value, and I'm just storing it in the session. Make sense? Everything okay? Right. So if I so I can if I restart this, right? They're still identical, but if this one puts in a value and I say I don't know, whatever, username Alice, and I do an enter, notice that the session object has a new attribute, right? A new key and a new value. See that? If I query it, if I refresh, notice that it's still there, right? It'll be there as long as the server's running, right? We did something like this, right? Didn't we do this with a variable and we store arrays in there, right? We did this explicitly, right? This is an API, right, that abstracts the idea that it allows you to store anything, right, any object at any key, right? So we could have done the first exam for second or third assignments, right? Instead of storing it at local variables, we could have stored it at a key called users, a key of websites, a key of pages, right? And we could have stored arrays in there, right? We could have done that instead. Here we have the username. Notice that the same URL, this user, if I go to the same exact URL, notice that even if I refresh, right, I don't have that username. See that? I don't have that same username. Right? Each individual user has its own cookie, so it's mapped to a different session, right? A different hash table, right? A different map. Make sense? Right? Actually, I can store anything I want. I can here I can say username Bob. Right? So now I have a username. I have Bob. Right? So if I just query for the session, right? This one has the username stored as Bob, but this one has Alice stored instead for the same attribute. Right? Actually, they have absolutely nothing to do with one another. One can store whatever it wants on one or the other. Make sense? Okay. Now we're storing just a plain old string, but certainly we could store, a whole object in there, right? And that object can be as complex as we want, right? Here here's a little JSON object I'm going to store that has just an attribute name and the value. So I restart the server. If I restart the server and I refresh, notice that the attribute is gone for both. Yes? Meaning that all this data was only stored in RAM, right, of the server. As you restart, it's all gone. The session is gone. Okay? And so if I store here, again, user ID, okay, /123, I have, right, user ID and then whatever, name 123, okay, and I don't have it here, right, but if I store something here, we'll have a website ID, right, I have some ID, so this is a key, and then it's whatever arbitrary object I want to store in here, right, it could be, an object that has arrays, that has other objects embedded. It could be anything I want. Again, we want to try and minimize whatever we do store in there, okay? Because we are demanding RAM from the server. Make sense? Right? And that would involve, how do I clean up the RAM, garbage collection, and all sorts of ideas on how to, minimize the footprint of my server. Okay, which up to this point we haven't had that issue, right? Because it's been entirely stateless. Okay, everybody good? All right, so we're gonna build on top of this. We're gonna build our security model using another library, which I'll introduce next.